right. So we are doing some Python. I'm actually really excited to be here because out of all the tools we've learned in this program, Python is my favorite one. I feel like Python has changed my life, and I know that sounds dramatic, but it truly has improved my life because whenever I have a problem and I want to fix it fast and I want to automate it, I can do it with Python. Python is a very powerful tool. It's so powerful that not only data analysts use it, data scientists also use it to train AI models, but also software engineers use it to create cool, fun apps. Researchers use it to study things better and do whatever researchers do. So it's a very, very, very powerful tool. So I'm excited to be here. So we are on week 16. Today is Thursday, so it's the second lecture. So we are going to be working with conditional logic in Python. So I'm going to stall here for a little bit to give you a chance to get there. Open your Codio. Mine is also loading, so we're all working here. Um, all right, awesome. So you should be seeing this case, the one that says an animal classification task. Um, so I'll tell you an anecdote while I wait everyone to be here on this screen. The anecdote is that um, I learned everything that you guys learned in this program in reverse. I learned Python first, then I learned SQL, then I learned Tableau, and the last thing I learned was Excel. So it's interesting how different people and different professionals have different paths, but at the end of the day, we all end up with the same skills. All right, cool. So you probably should be here by now. So usually what I like to do, completely optional, you don't have to do this, is that I click here on collapse. So I have more space to work on the code. And then if you want to recover the guide, I go back here and I recover the guide to read and follow along on whatever you need to do. But if you want to only focus on the code, this is where you will be working. Let me make mine bigger so you can see better the code that I'm typing. And you guys probably already know this because you've been working with Python for a little bit, but I also wanted to give you a quick refresher. So basically, what is happening in here? We have the terminal, and the terminal is something that every computer has. Your computer has it, my computer has it. Actually, let me show you on my computer how it looks like. This is the terminal. Mine, I have it with colors and pretty things. So every computer has a terminal. And back in the day, like in the 80s, computers didn't have animations and graphics and logos. They didn't even have a mouse. They only had a keyboard. So people were had to use the terminal to be able to use the computer, and they had to type commands in the terminal. So technically, everything that you can do in the computer by clicking around, opening different software, you can do from the terminal. Of course, people don't do it like that nowadays because it would take forever to run any simple task by having to type every single command. But you do use it for Python. So you can run Python in here and do different things. So this terminal is not Python. This is something that every computer has, and you can actually use it to, for example, load a bunch of files at the same time, or you could also do some mischief in there. So this is a very powerful tool. In this program, since we're working towards becoming data analysts, we're only going to focus in on the Python side, but that's what the terminal is. How do you access the terminal normally on a computer? It's going to depend on what kind of computer you are. If you're on the Mac, you can just like search wherever your programs are. So typically, or you could click here on the magnifier and type terminal, and then it would appear like this. This is the default terminal. It looks really ugly, so I downloaded an additional terminal called iTerm so I could customize it and make it pretty. On Windows is actually called, I think is command prompt line or console. So the name is a little bit different, but it still looks like a black screen. And I don't know where you access it. I think from the Windows bar. I haven't had a Windows in many years, so I don't know. Um, so you so this is very powerful. You can learn about it later on. But we're here because of Python. So you can actually run Python in so many different ways. You can run Python from the terminal directly without even writing anything in here. You could write stuff in here. You could have something that is called Jupyter Notebooks. You're going to learn Jupyter Notebooks later on. Actually, as a data analyst, you're going to be working quite a lot with Jupyter Notebooks. But here, what you have in here, notice that it says code.py. That's just a text file. So if you were working on your computer, it's a plain text file that instead of ending in .txt, it ends in .py. So that's what's happening in here. It's a little bit hard to realize because we're within Codio, but basically what we're doing here is that instead of using our computer's resources, we're using Codio's computer resources. So if you have a bad computer, it's slow, you're running out of memory, you don't have to worry about that because we have Codio. But at work, you would actually use your own computer resources. So here you type the comments, and here you have to type something to run these commands. So basically on the computer, if you were working on your computer, this would look like a file on your computer that you can double click and open it. But when you double click and open it, nothing happens. You have to run it from the terminal. So you guys probably already knew this, but I was we're gonna give you a little bit of quick refresher again in case there were some questions. At least for me, when I was learning how to code, the terminal was really confusing because I hadn't used the terminal before that. So I was putting myself in the shoes of the stage where you guys are right now. So that was the intro. Let's see. In real work, are we going to use the terminal? Probably not. If you follow data analysts roles, you're going to be using just Jupyter Notebooks. If you maybe are interested in pivoting into data science or software engineering, then you would be using the terminal. All right, awesome. So let's get started. What do we have for today? We have an animal classification tasks. Um, so what is the learning goal? We're going to learn conditionals in Python. You already know conditionals by heart, by living the human experience. Every single day you make conditions. If it rains, I'm going to bring the umbrella. If it doesn't rain, I'm going to wear a tank top. So you're making these conditions every single day. If I need to cook dinner, if I go to the store and there's no pork, then I'm gonna get beef. If there's no beef, then I'm gonna get chicken. So we work with conditionals all the time. So now we're gonna learn how to do that in Python because Python is a programming language. So anything you could potentially say in human language, in English, you can say it in Python. So we're gonna learn how to say that in Python. Um, so one of your friends who studies biology in college is writing an essay and needs to classify a large number of animals into three categories depending on certain characteristics. So this is where the power of Python comes in, because if you're going to classify only a couple of animals, you can just look at them and classify them by hand. But if you have hundreds of animals, then Python is going to make your life easier. That's why I love Python so much, and I say that it has changed my life because it allows me to do things so much faster than if I had to do it myself. Here today we're going to work with a small example, but you could scale this enormously. So your friend is trying to classify these animals using a spreadsheet package, but accidentally she deleted her formulas. Oh no. So she didn't keep any backups. She needs to submit this assignment as soon as possible. And since you are a Python expert, you're going to help your friend. And then you're going to charge her for your time. No, I'm kidding. um, so this is the decision tree that we're going to be using. So a decision tree, also a flow chart. It looks like this. And you actually do this in real life. Let's say things that are looking up. You applied to a bunch of data analyst jobs and you got 5 offers. How are you gonna decide which offer to take? So you create a mental decision tree. You say, okay, does this job pay more than since you got let's get ambitious. Since you got 5 offers, you can be picky and you can say, okay, the I have to make at least 6 figures. Does this job pay more than 600k 100k per year? So if no, you reject. If yes, you ask the follow-up question. Is this job remote or in person? So if it's in person, you say no. If it's in remote, you say yes. Does this job offer cool opportunities for me to continue growing into the company? And then the whatever job fall on here on all the yeses, you would select that job. So we do this without even realizing it. Like we don't draw it out, but our thinking process is always doing those type of things. So let's break down this diagram. Oh, we didn't even look at the diagram. So the first thing it says, does this animal fly? So if no, for now, let's just don't assign it to any category. If yes, it moves on to the next question. So the next question is this animal warm-blooded? If no, it's an insect. So for example, you have a butterfly because it flies and it's an insect and is warm-blooded, but it's an insect. And it is cold-blooded, so it's an insect. And then if yes, does this animal feed on blood? So if no, it's a bird. And if yes, it's a bat. So basically, you're gonna give the algorithm an animal, and it's gonna have one of these 4 labels. It's a bat, it's a bird, it's an insect, or it doesn't have a category for now. So for example, let's say a dog. Does this animal fly? No. So it's gonna be other. Let's say a chicken. Does it fly? I think chickens fly, so yes. Is it warm-blooded? Yes. Does it feed on blood? No, so it is a bird. So that's how this chart works. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to put it in Python such that we can enter an animal and it's going to tell us what it is using this decision tree. So that's what I
Sorry for this. I think we have lost Viviana. Let's wait for a couple of minutes. And if not, yeah, let me check in with her. I'm gonna pause the recording here. I apologize for this.
guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? All right, sounds good. What was the last thing I was saying? I feel like I was talking for a while to the air. So you guys saw the decision tree, right? So basically, we want to classify the animal. Okay, okay. So for example, if we get okay, if the chickens can fly, okay, chickens can fly. If the chicken can fly, the chicken is warm-blooded, and the chicken doesn't feed on blood, so it is a bird. So this is how the decision tree works. All right. So now let's run some code in here. So let me write this code. So let's define this Python object. So let's say animal. Let me make it even slightly bigger so you guys can see it. Okay, this one. Ah, okay. Oh no, it kicked me out. Give me 1 second. I get back in. And there you go. Okay, funds are safe. Okay, so now let's write something here in the text editor. So it says animal equals curly brackets, and it's gonna be flies in quotes, colon, true. The true is not in quotes because it's a Boolean value, comma. The next one is warm, if I could spell, warm blooded equals true. Not equals, colon, true, comma. And the last one is feeds blood, colon, equals, colon, true. So we said true, true, true for this animal. So quick, quick quiz. What data structure is this? Is it a set? Is it a dictionary? Is it a list? Is it a, I'm missing one. Is it a tuple? So I'll give you a hint. It's between dictionary and set because it has curly brackets. List has square brackets, so it's not a list. It's not a tuple. Tuple has parentheses. And like most of you said, it is a dictionary. Why is it a dictionary? So dictionaries and sets both have these curly brackets. But if you have a pair, so if you see a colon and commas, it's a dictionary. And it's because you have a key value pair. So the keys here are flies, warm-blooded, fits blood, true, true, true are the values. Yeah, so good job, everyone. So let me send you this in the chat in case you want to copy and paste it. And let's create a print statement because if I run this as is, so here I have to click here and type Python and my file name, which is code.py. Check that you're working on the same file as me. Maybe you were on a different window and you're on a different file, but you should match this name. So code.py. And then you have to hit enter. So it runs. So you hit enter and it worked because there's no error on the screen and we see that the terminal is waiting for, okay, give me a next command. I'm ready. So the reason why we didn't see anything printed is because we need to tell Python, hey, print something. So we see that something executed. So this line's executed, but it didn't say anything back. So I would say print animal. And now I do the same thing, Python code.py. And I see here my dictionary. So, yeah, that was a warm up. All right, so let's go with exercise number 1. This is exercise number 1. And let me pull this right here. I need this right here so you guys can see it. And let me open it this way. So right now, without doing any Python, by looking at this dictionary and looking at the decision tree, which class should this animal be assigned to? So I'll give you 1 minute for that, and then we'll do it together. And the answer is Batman. Well, not Batman, it's bat. It's a bat. Why is it a bat? Okay. Or animal flies, we said it was true. So it goes this way in the path. Or animal warm-blooded, we said it's true. So it goes this path. And then it feeds on blood, it's true. So it goes, does this animal feed on blood? Yes, it goes this way. And it is a Batman. All right. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, cool. So now let's go with the if. We're gonna learn the if. Then we're gonna learn the else, but we'll learn the if. So if I win the lottery, I'm gonna what do I want to do? I'm gonna, I don't know, go to every single country in the world if I win the lottery. So that's how it works in Python. The same thing. If you will write if in Python, so if something happens, whatever it is, if it's true, then you do that. So, for example, you could say, if I win the lottery, I'm going to travel the world. But if you don't win the lottery, then nothing happens. So, this is how it works. I see people saying in the chat that I would also retire early if I win the lottery. Um, all right, cool. Let's see what else. So it is very important for you to start the line with so the structure here in Python, this is very important. So you write if the expression colon, then you hit enter. And in Python, spaces are very important. In SQL, it didn't matter. In SQL, we could put a bunch of spaces and SQL would still run. In Python, the spaces matter. So here you need to have a tab. So a tab on your keyboard, it looks like this. It looks like this. It's next to the letter Q, usually in most keywords. So you need this tab in here to put the instruction. That's super, super important. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. Um, so you already know how to, let's do it with code. So for example, let's say you wanted to extract the value of the animal, whether it flies or not. So to extract that value, what would you do? You would say animal, and then in square brackets, you would put the key. So it's files. And I think at some point I saw a question regarding the double quotes versus single quotes. Both are valid as long as you begin and you end with the same one. So you can use single quotes or like here that Python use single quotes. Both are valid. When they make a difference is like if you're writing something in English, like I don't know how this works. You need to use double quotes so you can have the quote for the I don't. You have that quote. That's the only place where it will matter. But other than that, it doesn't matter. So here with this piece of code, I have already loaded my dictionary, and now I'm extracting the value of this dictionary that belongs to the key flies. And here my dyslexia got the best of me, and I wrote flies, files, but it's flies. So make sure you don't make the same mistake. Okay, so this is here. Let's run it in here. So Python code.py, you hit enter, and here you see the result, true. So this is how we extract results in here. And I just realized that was actually an exercise. So that's exercise number 2. I already did it for you, which is run animal flies in a cell and verify that the return value is true. So we already did that. So what are we gonna do next? So you can write an if statement. Let's write that if statement so we can get rid of this one. So let's get rid of this print statement. So we have our animal, and let's write if animal flies. And the condition I want to ask, because the first question, if we look at it here, the first question is, does this animal fly? So you want to ask that first question. How do we ask that question? If animal flies, so you could say if animal flies is true, but how do you say that is true in Python? You would say equals equals true. Then you say print. You could write something like animal flies. So again, what happened here? We want this first question, and the way to write this first question in Python is this way. So if animal flies, so if this value which in this case, what is this value? This value is going to be extracted from here. And then this equals equals is basically is like a question is. So true is equals true. And in this case, yes. If it was false, then it wouldn't get executed. But since in this case, this value and this value is the same, you have to put the two equals because that's the way to ask in Python if these two things are the same. So equals equals. Then if that's true, it executes the next line of code, which is animal flies. Things to pay attention in here. Notice that when I wrote it, I wasn't even being mindful. I just like wrote semicolon, colon, enter. And when I hit enter, it automatically this indentation for me. So indentation is when you have a tab space at the beginning of a line. So it did it automatically for me. So that's why I wrote animal flies. If for whatever reason this got lost, I don't know, like you accidentally deleted it, you need to make sure that you're hitting tab, the tab key again, and you have this structure. Because what is happening is that in a Python file, when you write a bunch of stuff, here you could write some other instruction, whatever other instruction you want. But how does Python know what instructions are under the conditional versus other instructions? So anything that is in here with this indentation belongs to this conditional. So it's only going to execute if this is true, if this statement is true. So now let's run it here in the terminal. Let's say Python code.py, and it says animal flies. Now I'm gonna write here temporarily false. What happens if this is false? So if that's false, that means that this whole value in here is false. So is false the same as true? This is like basically asking this question. And no, false is not the same as true. It's not the same thing. So this line of code is not going to get executed because that's not true. So let's do this. And here we write Python code and nothing happened. It didn't print anything. The animal flies never got printed because it was here. I modified it. So let me put it back to true so we have the same thing as in the guide. So basically in the guide, in the Codio guide, if you're following the Codio guide, it says instead of animal flies, it says move to the next stage, comma, because this animal flies. So let me copy and paste this into the chat so you can have it in there. There you go. So let's see. I see a few questions in the chat. Uh, how come it's equals equals and not one equal? That's a great question. So the single equal sign in Python, look that here we have the single equal sign. It means to assign something to a variable. So in this case, we're assigning this dictionary to the animal variable. We could also say, I don't know, Viviana equals 23 because that's my favorite number. So I'm not asking, is Viviana the same thing as 23? I'm just assigning this value. So I could just say print Viviana, and then I'm gonna run the Python code over here. And look, it printed that 23, which is this thing that I did. So it's only one equals when you assign a value to a variable. So I'm gonna get rid of this Viviana variable because we don't need it. But the equals equals is to ask a question. You're not assigning the value to this variable. You're not assigning the value true. You're asking, is it true? Is it the same? Are we the same thing? So that's a good question. And why is it not three equals? Because that's a good question. I don't know. For from a design perspective, whoever did Python, they chose to do this. In some other programming languages, you have like is true or something like that, but not in Python. In Python, you would do equals equals. Does the colon state the start of a code block depends on the case because notice that here we have a colon and we're not starting like a new block. Is the way how we define the dictionary. This is just how you define a dictionary and you always have to define it the same way. Um, but in here specifically is to indicate these are the instructions that belong to the conditional, and that's why you have to put the indentation. In SQL, we didn't have to worry about this. In Python, you do have to worry about the spaces. You're gonna see this colon used this same way once we learn about functions. In functions, the same thing happens. So you're gonna start seeing a pattern once we start learning more stuff as well. Let's see. Kevin is absolutely right. Given that the conditional, at the end of the day, you want it to evaluate to something that is, in this case, you could have just written it like this without the equals equals, and it would still work. Notice that it said move to the next stage because the animal flies. But in the meantime, while we get familiarized with conditionals, it's better that we expose the two so you see that you're comparing two things. And it only works when the variable that you're comparing is a Boolean. Otherwise, if it was not a Boolean, then you couldn't remove this. You would have to have something. But hey, good for the tip. Let's see. Yes, don't forget about the tab. All right, cool. So now we learned if something, then do something. But what about the else? So for example, I'm gonna steal yours, Jennifer. If I win the lottery, I'm gonna travel the world. No, if I win the lottery, I'm gonna retire. Else, so if I don't win the lottery, I have to continue working. So how do you say that? So for example, in this case, it would have been nice to have something that says, if animal doesn't fly, then classify it as other. So how do we do that in Python? So in Python, you actually do that with something that is called else. So here you hit enter. And this is very important because this is where most people are going to have errors. And feel free to share the errors on the chat because I'm always happy to address them. But here I sense that the errors are coming because this is a mistake I also did when I was learning Python, which is if you hit enter and you want to write another instruction that belongs to the conditional, you can continue writing in here. And notice that there's a tab here and a tab here. But if you're done with your instructions after the conditional has happened, you have to remove that tab. So naturally you will write enter and you will be tempted to continue writing here. And we need to write else, but you need to remove this tab in here. So you removed it. So what this means is like, okay, these instructions execute if this is true. If that's not true, then we have our else. So what happens? This is kind of like this is exactly what we were doing in SQL with the case one. This is the case when something, and then you at the end you had end. So this exactly same thing that we were doing in SQL. We're just doing it in Python. So if the animal flies, if it's true that it flies, it moves on to the next stage. Else, it says print. And what do we have in our decision tree? Let's look at our decision tree. Our decision tree says, do not assign any category. So let's put that. Do not or don't assign any category. So for the person that was asking the question about the quotes, here I absolutely need to use the double quotes because otherwise the single quote would destroy the thing. Python will get confused. So if you have a single quote, you go for the double quotes. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. You could just use single quotes or double quotes. All right, so let's run this. No, before we run it, let's think about what is going to happen. So our animal currently in this moment, it flies. It says flies equals true. So what is this variable in here? It's true. So is true the same as true? Yes. So it prints this in here. It's not gonna print this in here because it's not an else. It's not like if I win the lottery, I'm gonna retire and keep working. No, I'm gonna retire. And then If you don't win the lottery, then you have to continue working. So let's run it. Let's run this in here. And let's say Python code.py. And it says, okay, move to the next stage because this animal flies, which is here. But what if this animal didn't fly? So let me change this in here, false. So now what is happening? So we know that this animal doesn't fly. So this value in here is this, right? So this is false. So false equals true. So is false the same thing as true? No. So this line is not going to get printed. Anything that belongs to the if because it's indented, it's not going to get executed. So it has the else. Else. So if this is not true, what is going to happen? Don't assign any category. So once I run here the code.py, what I should see is message. So let's do it together and let's see if we see this message. And yeah, effectively it says don't assign any category. So let's see. If I win the lottery, I'm eating 2 eggs every morning. That made me laugh. Um, is not or. Um, I see where your question is going, Omar. We're gonna learn about or and ors later today, but in this case, no. In this case, we just follow the else structure. So either this happens or the else happens. All right, awesome. So um, let's go with the next one. So now that we know this, let's write some comments in Python. So you know how in SQL you will write comments with 2 dashes, and then you could write whatever you wanted as for your own reference. In Python is with a hashtag. So you have to write hashtag space, and then here I'm gonna write, okay, this is the first question. So I have the first question. Now I'm gonna write the second question. So second question. So let's not worry too much about integrating all the questions all together. For now, let's just ask this question. So, is this animal warm-blooded? Yes. If not, then it's an insect. So, if insect or it moves on to the next stage. So let's do this. So how will we do this? So we would say if animal. And now I'm not gonna look at the attribute whether it flies or not, this attribute of flies. Now I need to look at this attribute, the warm-blooded. So let's do this. So warm-blooded equals true. Oh, make sure that you're writing true the correct way. So if the animal is warm-blooded, what happens? It moves on to the next stage. Let's worry about this question later on. So that would be print um, move to the next stage because this animal is warm-blooded. Blooded. And then we write the else. Remember the else, we need to remove the tab. So the if and the else are at the same height, if you may. So else, and we say, okay, print if it's not, okay, so if it's warm-blooded, it moves here. If it's not warm-blooded, what happens? It is an insect. So you could just say here, the animal is an insect. So basically, we're just doing this small decision tree in here. We already had this one. We haven't put it together. We haven't put these two together, but we're doing this little one. So let's look at it here. I'm gonna uh, comment this out for a second so we don't see the results of this one. We only see the results of the second one to make sure that this is working, and then we'll put it together. So because it's commented out, it's not gonna get executed. Okay, so what is happening here? It says or right now as it is, let me change this back to true. Right now as it is, or animal is it flies, it's warm-blooded, and it feeds on blood. So let's look at this second question. So the second question is asking for the value in here. Oh, that was a bad circle. Let me do that again. So it's asking for this value in here. This value in here is true. And this value in here is true. So these two things are the same. So it checks. So it should print this. If we did things correctly, it should say move the animal onto the next stage. And this is not going to execute it because it did satisfy the condition. So it doesn't go through the else. So let's just do it now. So let's see Python code.py. And it says move to the next stage because the animal is warm-blooded. So exactly what we had anticipated. Let's just, for the fun of it, change it here to false. So since this value right here will be false, so false is not the same thing as true. So it wouldn't execute this line of code. I would expect it to execute this line of code. And I run it. And indeed, it says the animal is an insect. And now I can show you what I was telling you about. You could continue writing instructions. So for example, let's say I want an instruction completely outside of the question, outside of the conditional. So I could say print, I'm having so much fun learning Python. So what is going to happen here? So basically this print, because it has this tab, it belongs to this if. This print, because it has this tab, it belongs to this else. But this one doesn't have any tab. Notice that it's at the same height as if, as else, and as print. So regardless of what's happening with the conditional, this is always going to get printed. So I'm going to show you. Let's do this. Python. So it says, okay, in this case, we still here had the false. So the animal is an insect. So that's what it printed in here. And it said it also printed this in here because it was not indented. Now the same thing, let's just modify this in here. So it prints move on to the next stage. But it still is gonna print this because this doesn't belong to the conditional. So let's write this. And yeah, it says move on to the next stage. And it prints this no matter what. So this conditional has no impact on this line. This line is always going to run because it's at the same height of these two. And same thing in here with the conditional. You could have several instructions in here. So for example, I could type here print 2 plus 2, and I run it. And it says move on to the next stage because this conditional was satisfied. It also printed 4 because I gave it the instruction in here. So notice how this line, let me use a different marker. This line belongs to the if, so it got printed in here. This line also belongs to the if because they both have the same indentation. So this one also got printed in here. And then this one doesn't belong to anything because it's not indented. So it's still executed no matter what. So that was that. This basically, you guys already learned conditionals. From now on, what we're going to be doing is a little bit of more complicated examples. So we practice it, but this is conditionals. You guys already learned conditionals in Python. So let me get rid of this sentence. Let me get rid of the 4. So it's the same thing. And let me do this second question in the chat so you can have it copy and paste it if you need to. Let's see the questions in the chat. How is it going in the chat? Different programming languages have different structures. The logic is the same, but sometimes they use different words or they expect you to use parentheses or different things. So you just kind of have to adapt from diff programming language to programming language. How did I commented this out? I just wrote hashtags at the beginning of each one of the lines. I did it manually. I just went through each one of the lines. You can also make the multi-line comment like Troy said. So that's also an alternative. You can just put triple quotes in here. And notice that everything became red. That's because it's a comment and then triple quotes in here. So I closed it. Now that all of this is in red, is commented out. So that's also another option if you want to comment out a big piece of code. Arlene has a great question. So for example, let me just put it in here, like print 2 plus 2. Oh, 2 plus 2 versus print 2 plus 2. So what is the difference between those two? Let's execute it. So this one, if you want it to be treated as an actual text, you need to put it in the quotes. So that's why I printed this out like this. If you don't put the quotes, it's gonna execute the operation. And since it's numbers, it works. If it would be something else, like, I don't know, hello, it will break. Look, that is gonna break. Uh, It says, I don't know, it literally, the error says name hello is not defined. So it's like confused, like what are you asking me to do? So it only works with numbers, that thing. So it executes right away in the terminal. But you could also create a variable and save this result. So there's many ways to do the same thing if you wanted to. All right, let's see. We need to do that in order to run the code for question two. So for question two, I only made the comments on these questions so it wouldn't be confusing when we were looking at each one of the results. But now that it's not commented it out, look at what happens. Python, uh, Python code.py. It's now first running this first conditional. So because the animal flies, it says this. So that's what it says here. And because the animal is also warm-blooded, it also prints this one in here. So that's why I made the comments in here so we wouldn't be distracted by the execution of this first question. But now that we have answered the two questions, it's fine. And we actually need to combine them now because this conditional is being completely independent of this conditional. But in reality, that's not what we have in here. We have a follow-up question. So technically, this second question should be in here because if the animal flies, you ask the follow-up question. If the animal doesn't fly, then you just say don't assign to any category. There's no point that if the animal doesn't fly, you would ask a second question. You will be wasting your time. It will still work, but you're wasting your time. And the idea is that you make the code as efficient as possible. Here you don't notice it because we're only working with one animal so far. So it executes instantaneously on the instant. But even if you had, but imagine if you had like 1 million animals and then you were asking this question to all the animals that you didn't really needed to ask that follow-up question because you already know you're going to give it this label, it would make your code that much slower. So you need to think about those strategies on how to make your code more efficient. So that's actually what we're going to be doing next. We're going to be asking that follow-up question, not as a separate question, but as a follow-up here under this conditional. So great question, Javier, because it led me to this. Let's see. And all right, awesome. So let's do that. Let's do the next thing, which is, okay, let's write this conditional within in here. So we have the same instruction in here. We ask this follow-up question only if the animal actually flies. So how do we do that here? We hit enter, and I like to keep my code organized so I'm not confused. So I say, okay, second question. And I write my second question. Notice that all of this is having the same indentation, so it's gonna work the same way. And here, basically, I write my other question, which is the animal warm-blooded? And if it's true, then print move to the next stage because this animal is warm-blooded. And then the else, if not, then we already know the animal is an insect. So we no longer need this. This one was just to help us build what we needed to ask. Basically, I rewrote this in here. But now that we know that we asked the question correctly, we tested it, we can write it directly in here as the follow-up. And let me know if you have questions about that. I'm happy to answer questions. But basically, notice what is happening in here. Here you have this big indentation. So all of these lines of code are only going to get executed if this conditional happens. But within in there, you also have a conditional, which is this one. So if this conditional happens, this is going to run, but then it's going to ask this follow-up question. So this line of code belongs to this if, and this line of code belongs to this else. So let's see it in action. So we have, okay, let's make this a little bit bigger. And we have, okay. The first question is animal flies. What do we have at the moment is true. So true equals true, yes. So it's gonna print this one. Then the next question is gonna also work because it's running, all of these lines of code are gonna run because of this conditional. So the second question asks, is the animal warm-blooded? Which in this case is true. So this whole thing is true. So it's gonna execute this line of code. And because this is true, this is not gonna execute. This else obeys this conditional here. Notice that they're at the same height. And then this other else obeys this if, the first if, but because it was true, it's not gonna execute. So this line is also not gonna get printed. So we expect to see this line and this line. So basically, right now, how we have the code, we should see that the animal moved to the next stage because this animal flies, and move to the next stage because this animal is warm-blooded. So let's run and see if what I just said is true. So we write here code.py. And I forgot Python code.py. And it says move to the next stage because this animal flies. Move to the next stage because this animal is warm-blooded. So you have these two in here, exactly what we had said. Now imagine if we had, let's say this is false. Let's change this to false. So what do we expect in the result? Let's do it before we run the code. So this one right now, true. So this else already is not going to get executed. And this is going to print. So we're for sure going to see this line. And now we go into the second question. So the second question, this is false. So this is not gonna get executed. So this line doesn't apply. But because this else belongs to this if, it is gonna execute this one. So once we run this code, it should say move to the next stage because this animal flies, and it should say this animal is an insect on only these two lines of code. So let's see. And we do Python code.py, and exactly how we had said it. It says move to the next stage because this animal flies, and move to the and animal is an insect. So in the first stages of learning Python, I would strongly recommend you doing this exercise. Always think of what the result is going to be before you execute it, and try to match the output and see where your logic went wrong if you didn't match the output. The last example, imagine the animal doesn't fly. So let's have it like this. So the first question is this one. Animal flies, this is equals false. So that means that everything here under the conditional is gonna not be answered, and it's only gonna print this else that belongs to this first question. So it's only gonna say, do not assign any category. And this is great because now that we know that the animal doesn't fly, we didn't waste any time asking the second question because we don't care. If we look at the decision tree, the minute you know the animal doesn't fly, you don't ask any follow-up questions. If you wanted to ask some type of follow-up question, like does it have four legs or something like that, you will write that conditional here under the else. But in this case, you saved yourself some time. It never asked this question. It just directly said, do not assign any category. So let's see it in action. And is python.code.py. And you see, do not assign any category. So now let's reset this animal. So it's the same as the example, but that's how conditionals work. Let's copy and paste it and send it onto the chat. And I see a few questions in the chat, so I'll address them briefly. Trouble with indenting. If you have trouble with indenting, I'm not sure what the problem is, but typically just hit tab and it should work. If not, four spaces should do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess not in this editor. Typically four would do it. No, then never mind. Just focus on the tab. And if you're having a different issue, let us know and we can look at it. Let's see what errors are there happening. I see an error in the chat. So let me show you here. So whenever you have an error, the error messages are super helpful. So for example, here it says else. So I automatically look at all my else's to see what's the error in here. So I see else. Well, what else's do we have in here? We have this one, we have this one, and we have this one. And the problem in here is that every else needs to belong to an if. So for example, this else, remember, the if this else belongs to this if should be at the same height. But in here there it's a problem with the indentation. So let me look at the code in here so I can show it better. Oops. And for example, here with this one, let me make it a little bit smaller. So the here notice that this else here belongs to this if. So if this is false, what happens? This is what happens. So for me to indicate to Python, okay, these two are a pair, they need to be in the same height. So here I don't see any else being in the same height, and that's why Python complain on line 9 right away. So this is the first else that needs fixing, and all the other ones probably also need fixing. So make sure that they match. So for example, this one here matches the height of this one. So that's one of the challenges coming from SQL, switching to Python, is that in SQL we didn't care about the spaces. SQL handled them better. But in Python, these spaces are very, very important. And thank you for sharing this example. So it allowed me to show this. Um, all right. And so let's see what else. Yes. Hank asked that question in the chat. So the ifs can exist on its own. You can ask this if question like this, and it would still work. But for you to have an else, you need an if that goes before it. The else can't exist on its own because it says it's like if on the street you would say, else I'm gonna continue working, and people are like, what? But if you say if I win the lottery, then I travel, else I'm gonna continue working. So it's the same thing in Python. Um, you do need to use the two equals. That's asking the question if one single equals is to a value. Double equals is to ask the question if these two are the same. If you want to run the code faster, well, not faster, but if you don't want to type Python code.py every single time, a quick trick is that you can click on the arrow going up and it shows you the last command that you had and hit enter so you don't have to write it. And let's see what other questions there are. Yeah, the indents have to be perfect, otherwise it won't run. So exactly the same amount of time in here because the indentation tells you what belongs to what. So in this case, this is telling you, okay, this instruction belongs to this. This comment belongs to this. This if belongs to this. But this one belongs to this. So the indentations are very important. Indentations are very important. Let's see. Oh, interesting. I found C++ to be much harder than Python. So if you think C++ is easier, then you have the battle one already. Um, same height. When I say the same height, I'm meaning that notice that they start on the same place in the line. They're not indented. Same thing with this one. This one is indented only once. So these are in the same place in the code. Let's see. So they're in the same level. There can be several ifs oh, that's a great question. So can there be one if and multiple else's? That's what we're gonna do after the break. So instead of writing if else, there's something that you can say elif to mix those two together. So you can, and we will do that. And the um I'll say it real quick because I saw the question 2 times. But a quick refresher on the data structures. If it's a curly bracket, it might be a dictionary or a set. If it's a parenthesis, is a tuple, and if it's a square bracket, is a list. But maybe the best reference for that will be the video from last class. All right, cool. So I think we are overdue with our break. So let's go on that 5 minute break and then we come back with more conditionals. So I'll give it back to Juan.
Okay, perfect. Let me pause the recording. I'm gonna go ahead and share the timer.
Sounds good. Thank you, Juan. All right, so let's come back. I know that was a lot, but that's why now we're gonna practice so we can master those conditionals. Now, let's forget for a second about this. We don't need this for now. We only need the animal. So I'm just gonna comment everything out so we don't have to think about it for a little bit. And let's go with that third question. So the third question, and let's focus only on the third question, which is this one. How would you create a conditional for just this? For a second, you can forget about the first two questions. You only need a simple conditional with one if and one else for these two. So I'll give you 5 minutes. So you have 5 minutes to think about it. Please, even if you get it wrong, the exercise of you trying it helps you learn better than just watching. And then after the 5 minutes are up, we'll do it together. And of course, let me know if there's any questions. All right, so we're coming close to those 5 minutes. I'm happy to see that some people are already taking the adventure of putting that third conditional onto the other conditionals. So let's do it together. So let's start. I'm gonna start just so you all can see with the little one. So how does conditional work? I have to type first if. And then the two things I want to compare. So I want to say, I want to compare the value of this animal when for the field feeds blood, which in this case is true. So animal feeds blood and equals equals. So I can compare the two values. This. So I'm basically asking, is this value true? And if so, then say print. And what are you going to print? Let me make this bigger so you can see the screen better. So print, the animal is a bat because if it feeds some blood is a bat. So the animal is a bat. Else, but notice what is happening here. I'm hitting enter, but I know I'm done with my instructions for the conditional. So now I'm gonna get rid of that indentation. So my else is at the same level as my if. Notice that they're at the same level. So else, colon, very important, don't forget the colon, print, and whatever is happening in here. So if it doesn't feed on blood, it is a bird. So the animal is a bird. So this is the third question. And when we run it, just this third question. So here's another trick in case you are curious with the terminal. You could say clear, the word clear, and enter, and it cleans it if it was bothering you, like it was bothering me the previous results. So clear, and then it gets rid of everything. So now I can say, okay, Python code.py, and I hit enter, and it says the animal is a bat. Indeed, it is a bat. Why? Because this current value, it's true. So because true is the same thing as true, it goes through here. Um, for those of you that are having trouble with the indentation within Codio, maybe not now because it would take you some time to set up the account. But later on, maybe this weekend, you can try at home something that is called Google Colab. Um, so on Google Colab, you can create a notebook and run Python code in there. I wouldn't do it now because you're gonna just waste time doing that. But if it continues happening and code is not working, you can go that route. Um, all right. So this was the third question, but now we need to incorporate it onto our big tree in here, right? This one in here. So basically, we only want to ask that question if the animal has warm blood. So I'm looking at this. So if the animal has warm blood, then I ask the follow-up question. So here I will write my third question. So, and the third question, after I put it in here, is exactly the same thing. So I can just copy and paste. However, be careful with indentation. If it gets modified, you need to fix it when you copy and paste it. So I copy and I paste, and see here the indentation got destroyed. So I need to go back and fix it, but let me get rid of this. So what is happening in here? I have my second question. Here I have what it prints. It moves on to the next stage. Then here I have the other question, which belongs to this if. But then this print should be what happens after this if. And notice that it's not underneath this if. So I need to fix that one. That got messed up when I was copying and pasting. So tab and tab, and there you go. And then this if has this else here. So this should be at the same level as well. So now these two are at the same level, and this print belongs to this else. So now it's like underneath this else. So now you have your first, second, and third question. So currently, how's our animal looking? Our animal is looking like this. So it goes through the first question. This is true. So it goes through here. Then the second question, this is true at the moment. So it goes through here. And then this question is true at the moment. So it also goes through here. And then everything else, it ignores it. So basically, what we should expect in the output is this, and this. So this is move on to the next stage because this animal flies. Move to the next stage because this animal is warm-blooded, and this animal is a bat. So let's run this code, see if that's what we get. And indeed, that's what we got. Let's try with a different different animal. So let's make this true, false, and true. So I want you to look before you even run the Python code. By looking at this, let me make it a little bit smaller so you can see everything. There you go. This is everything. By looking at this animal, notice that I modified it. What lines do you think it's going to print, this algorithm? So I'll give you, let's say, 2 minutes so you can think about it. And then we do it together. So you don't have to do any Python at the moment. Just by looking at this code, tell me what lines do you think are going to get printed.
Left. Left. Seconds left. Seconds left. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time's up.
All right, so let's do it together. I see those answers coming in into the chat. So how the code is framed at this moment, this is what would happen. So let's look at it. So we have this conditional. So the first thing is animal flies. This value at this moment is true. So now it's going to look at all these instructions, and this one is not going to execute because it's true. So this one is not going to execute. Then the next question. So this one is gonna get printed. So here. Now the next question. This one, this value at this moment is false. So because it's false, then it's not gonna print this. It's not gonna do any of this. Maybe I should use a different marker. Like it's not gonna do any of this because this is false. So all of this, it's gone. And then it's gonna print this one. Um, the animal is an insect. So it never, given that this was false, it never even looked whether it fed on blood or not. So let's do this. Let's run this. Let's see if we do get these two lines. So code, oh, here, code, Python, code.py. And indeed, we get here, move, this is the last one, move to the next stage because the animal flies and the animal is an insect. So it gets this right. Now, if you only want to show the result, like there's no point of saying move on to the next stage because you already have asked that question, like you could get rid of this and you get rid of this. So now whenever you ask, the answer is going to either be the animal is a bat, the animal is a bird, an insect, or don't assign to any category. So let me rerun this. And there you go. The animal is an insect. So let me copy and paste this into the chat. And I want you to marvel for a second at how far we've gotten here today. Today, we came to the class. We didn't know if and else's at all. We didn't know conditionals. We were given this decision tree. And now we have been able to convert this from a decision tree that your friend explained to you to this fully working Python code. So that deserves some claps. Yay, good job, everyone. All right, so your friend is also very impressed with everything you've done. So now your friend is asking you to do something else. Now your friend is asking you to use this decision tree. So this is a new decision tree that we're going to have to code. It says, is this animal height less than 1 foot? So if yes, label as small. Is this animal height less than 2 feet? If yes, label as medium. And if no, label as large. So we could very much do this with if and else's. So let's just try it for a second. So now that we have this, I'm gonna get rid of this for a second so we can start fresh. And then here I'm also gonna write clear and we start fresh. So now let's define a new animal objects. Let's say animal equals curly brackets. And then I'm gonna say in quotes height equals 5. And then just to test it out, I'm gonna say print animal height. So what's the animal height? Python ideally should say animal height. So Python should say it's 5, right? And I run it. And I have a mistake. And it's around line 2. Notice that it says it's line 2. I have this mistake in here. And it's because it's not an equals, it's a semicolon. So see how you can use the errors to determine what it was. And Python sometimes gives you the suggestion on how to fix it. It was telling me maybe you meant a double equals, but actually the suggestion was bad. It's just the colon. So let's try that again. Let's do Python code.py, and now it works. So now it tells me, because I'm here printing the animal, it tells me that the height is 5. So let's create this first condition like we know it. So let's do that. So first question is gonna be if animal height, if animal height is less than 1, because that's what the question is asking us, print small, right? And if not, else, well, since we're only doing this first question, you could say else print next stage. We'll worry about the next stage later on. So let's try this. Python code.py. And it says next stage. Why did it say next stage? Because this value, animal height, at this current moment is 5. So basically here the question was, is 5 less than 1? And 5 is not less than 1. So this is false. And because it was false, it didn't print this. It just went on to the else statement and printed the following one. So next stage. And that's why we got next stage. So now let's add the second condition. So the second condition is the following question. This question is, if the answer was no, we already have this else. So if the answer was no, ask a follow-up question. So if, so notice that this if happens after this else, because this is like, if the answer was no, then do this if. So if animal height, if animal height less than 2 feet, right? Less than 2 feet, print, what do we print? We should print medium. And else, for that if, next stage, no, not next stage, you should say already large. All right, so what is going to happen here before we run it? Our current value is 5. So it says, is this 5 less than 1? The answer is no, so it's false. So it's not going to execute this, but now it's going to execute this block of code. Now let's go on to the next one. This is still 5. So the question is 5 less than 2? This is no, it's false. So it's not going to execute this, and therefore it's going to execute this. So we should expect large to be the answer. So let's run it. Python code, and it says large. And in theory, here, this was the second question. So let me copy and paste it into the chat. And this absolutely works, but there's another way that you could do it in Python to make it a little bit more simplified. So let me show you the other way in Python. So the other way in Python, I'm gonna print here. Okay, here I'm gonna say print first approach. And then here I'm gonna say second approach. So when we print on the terminal, we know what are we looking at. So the second approach starts the same, exactly the same. But notice that here you have an else immediately followed by an if. So instead of doing this else if, you can just say here elif. So elif and then the condition. So this condition. So animal height less than 2, print medium, else print large. So in here, in the middle, you can have as many elifs as you want. The last one has to be an else. So you let Python know everything else that we didn't consider, make it this value. So here you could have one that says, I don't know, like elif, animal animal height less than 5, uh, less than 5, print medium large. So you can add as many conditions as you want in there. I'm gonna remove this one because it's not part of the decision tree that we were given, but this works. So I'm gonna run it. So the first approach gives us large and the second approach gives us large. So these two approaches are exactly the same. Maybe let me put it side by side so you can appreciate their differences and their similarities. And this is the other one. So this is the first approach. And the main difference is that instead of having this else if, you condense it in a single one that is elif, like the Turkish name, elif. So elif, you put the rest. We got rid of the question, I see a question in the chat. What happened to the next stage? We got rid of that because that was a print statement. But if you wanted to keep it in here, you could write it in here and say, well, actually, you should go on here, print, move on to next stage. But just since we already had all the results, that was kind of like a placeholder, so we removed it. I like how Hank is thinking. You should always, as a programmer, assume that your end user is going to be very bad, that your end user is not very smart, because if an user is going to break a piece of code, they're going to break it. So, for example, that's a point. Height should never be negative. So, we should be accounting here in the conditionals. Somehow say if animal height less than 0, print incorrect height. That's not possible, something like that, because height could never be negative. So that's exactly how a programmer needs to be thinking. All right, so let's put this into the chat. Well, I'll put the two of them so you can have them, all of them. First approach, second approach, and there they are. It wouldn't work if I don't know if I'm understanding the question correctly, but if you put like commas in here, it would get confused. You need to have a single instruction for each one of the questions. In the second, this is a great question. Thank you, Shankar. So the indentation always matters in Python, always, but it works a little bit different. That's a great point because if you look at the else here, then you need to have everything that needs to be executed after the else aligned below it. Where in here the elif needs to be in the same aligned on the same line as the if. Because basically this elif becomes an if. It gets promoted to be an if. Where before here was like a sub if. But yeah, that's a good point. The indentation here is a little bit different. But it always matters. You should always follow the correct indentation. Exactly. All right. Okay, so now we have that, and now we are going on to our next stage. This is everything that you could possibly need with elif. With if, Elise, and Elise. Who's Elise? Who am I thinking of? Of if, else, and elif. That was a tongue twister. So this is everything that you could possibly need with if, else, and elif. And you can build really, really complex structures only using conditionals. This is a little bit of a meme. I'm going to show your meme, Jeff, but it's a really good meme. It's a little bit of a meme. Oh no, did you remove it? I don't see it anymore. Uh, it's this meme. Let me find it. AI else if meme. This one. I could swear I had seen it in the chat. But basically, this is the Scooby-Doo meme, and it says, Fred says, "I'm gonna discover who the real monster is," and it says, "I," and then below it is a bunch of if, else, if, else, if, else. So what we learned today is actually very powerful because underneath the hood of AI, everything is conditionals. It's just conditionals, conditionals, conditionals. So it seems just like something easy right now. We're just classifying some innocent animals, but you can build really amazing stuff with conditionals. Um, all right, cool. So let's go with the last topic, which is Boolean logic. So Boolean logic. There we go. So Boolean, remember, Boolean is one of those data types that we have in Python. So we have numbers, we have strings, which is just text, and we have Booleans. So Boolean is literally just the value of true, 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 and false. And those two values are very important in coding, in computing, because at the end of the day, in the computer, you're working with binary code. And true means like the byte is on and false, it's off. And that's how you transmit all the information. So you would never go to that deep level because you're not building computers, but at the end of the day, that's everything what it is. So Boolean logic is super important. We were already doing a little bit of Boolean logic whenever we were seeing the truths and the falses in there. But there's something called Boolean logic. And for those of you that like to think about arguments, logic is a really nice subject that you can take. You can learn logic, how to think logically. In undergrad, I studied mathematics, so I saw mathematical logic. But it's a very, very similar class. Lawyers have to take that class so they can think logically. And of course, computer scientists, anyone working with a computer needs to know how to think logically to be able to arrange the different instructions together. So that's what we're going to be doing next. And there's four Boolean operations. So you know how with numbers you can have operations. So you have numbers and you have plus. So you add two numbers. You have the subtraction. So you subtract two numbers. You have multiplication. You have division. So those are operations that you can do with numbers. But you can do operations with true and false. And those are the Boolean operations. And you actually already know them. This is the best news. Best news. It works just like the English language. So you have and, you have or, you have I read it as soar, but I don't know if people read it like that. Or also exclusive or and not. So and in Python, you write it the same way is and, or you write it the same way is or. Exclusive or is the hat, the that has a special name. The carrot. Uh, I forgot the name. But anyways, the symbol in my keyword, and typically most keywords will be above the number 6. So you have to do shift 6 to produce that symbol. And the not, which is just the 9 stuff, is not. So let's start with the first one, with and. So with and, you have two Boolean variables, A and B. This is, so if you have A and B, what is the result? So false and false equals false. So false and false equals false. False and true equals false. True and false equals false. True and true equals true. I know that this just sounded like gibberish, but the way you can think about it is, let's say I want to cook dinner and I only want to cook dinner if in this store I can find rice and beans. If one is missing, I don't feel like eating rice alone. I don't feel like eating beans alone. So if there's rice and beans, then I'm gonna cook dinner. If there's rice but no beans, then I'm not gonna cook dinner. If there's no rice but there's beans, I'm also not gonna cook dinner. And if there's neither, I'm not gonna cook dinner. Um, So how does this look like from a Python perspective? You could say rice. I'm gonna give it a equal sign, kind of assign a value to rice. So let's say true. Then beans equals false, for example. Now let's just start with true. And then I would say print rice and beans. And notice that the and became blue because this is a Boolean operator. So it's not like you're writing the word and. This is an actual operation in Python. And then rice is just this variable and beans is this variable. So let's run this, clear, and then Python code.py, and it says true. What if it's only rice? I mean, only beans. So I run this. It's false. I'm not gonna cook dinner. What about if it's both of them are false? I'm not gonna cook dinner either. So, and I think I'm only missing this one being true. Is this what I'm missing? And it's false. So it's only true if both conditions are true. If both rice and beans are true, then it prints this true. Otherwise, it doesn't. So that's what we have here. Now let's go with the or. Same logic. So maybe I'm cooking dinner, but I'm feeling more flexible. So I say, well, for the protein, either chicken or pork. I don't really like pork, but anyways, chicken or pork. So if in the store there's chicken or pork, I'm gonna be able to cook because I can pick whichever one. If there's chicken but no pork, I'm still able to cook because there's protein. If there's no chicken but there's pork, then I'm able to cook dinner. But if there's no chicken and no pork, then I'm not gonna have protein in my dinner, so I'm not gonna cook dinner. So that's how or works. We could do it in here as well. You could say chicken equals true, pork equals false. No, let's start with true, and then print chicken and no, or pork. So in the story, if there's chicken and pork, it says true. So I'm gonna cook dinner. If there's only one of them, I'm also gonna cook dinner. But if there's none of them, then too bad because I'm not gonna be able to cook dinner. So we see false in here. So yeah, Boolean logic works the same way like the English language. You've been working with this your whole life. Like when your parents give you an instruction, the teacher gives you an instruction, maybe you're the parent given the instruction, like, please clean your room and the bathroom. So if the kid cleans the bathroom, then you're gonna be sad. You wanted the kid to clean both things. So you've been working with Boolean logic your whole life. So let's see. Yeah, I was thinking of the same joke of the programmer and the wife with the milk. I was literally the whole time thinking of that joke. All right, let's go with the next one. So the next one is the one that is a little bit less intuitive, which is the exclusive or. So the exclusive or, look at the table. So basically, it's only true if they're different, but if they're both the same, um they're false. And in the previous cohort, one of the TAs had a really good example, and I said I'm gonna use that example in the next cohort, and I forgot I forgot to write it down. So if one of the TAs, if that TA was in that cohort and you could put that example in the chat, that would be fantastic. But the example I can think of, you know how sometimes in houses you have those switches in two different places of the room that turns on the same light, but it's two different switches. So you could have switch 1 and you could have, this needs to be capitalized, and then you could have switch to, and this is true. So if the two switches are facing the same position, the light will be off. Same thing if they're switched on the other position, the light will be off. So let me show you here. Switch one, soar is with the caret, which is shift 6 on my keyboard. So shift and the letter 6. So switch 2. So here, this is the exclusive OR. So if both switches are facing the direction up, the light is going to be off. If both are facing down, the light is also going to be off. But if one switch is up and the other one is down, the light is going to be on. So if they're different, the light is going to be on. So if they're different, the light is going to be on. But if they're facing the same way, the light is going to be off. So that's the best example I can think of. But I remember that there was a TA that came up with a fantastic example. Oh, I was hoping they would anyone will remember. Because it was like a real world example. I wish I would have written down. If someone can think of a more like daily example, that would be great. But now you know this, or when you're coding, it was super useful and you see it right away. Oh, yeah, that's an exclusive or. But in real life, I haven't come across that many situations with the exclusive or. And then the other one is even more intuitive, the not. It's just denying whatever you're saying. So, for example, here, let's say happy. No, let's say not even. I can just print it directly. So not true. What is going to be not true is going to be false. And not false is going to be true. So now you switched it. So, okay, we are masters of Boolean logic now, right? So what would you do with this information? What is a real world scenario where you could use it? So I could think about it as in a work scenario. So imagine you're a data analyst for an HR department, and you've been tasked with automatically rejecting candidates for a given position. So you're like, okay, rude, but I have to do it. So you say, okay, candidate, and I'm going to create a dictionary. So if the candidate, I'm going to ask if the candidate has a master's degree. Let's say for now it's true. And if they have experience. And let's say it's true. So this specific candidate has both a master's degree and experience. So you could ask if candidate has master's or candidate has experience, then print give them an interview, else print sorry, thanks for applying, but we found someone better. That's rude. Don't write that. Write something nicer. But anyway, so if the candidate has one or the other, then you would give them an interview. So for example, I run my code and you say, give them an interview. What if the candidate, well, they don't have a master's degree, but they have experience? Would you give them an interview according to this code? Yes, you would give them an interview because it's an or. If you change it to an and, then this poor candidate got axed. So let's change it back to the or. Same thing if they had instead no experience, but they had a master's. Let's see what would happen. You would give them an interview. But what if they don't have experience? Not even like project experience, school experience. They don't have any experience and they don't have a master's. You reject them. So this is how you will put it into practice. This is actually how it would happen. I can also think of a bouncer. For example, a bouncer would say, um, "Are you over 21 and do you bring money to come into the club?" And you can tell that I lived in Miami from this example, but are you over 21 and do you have money to pay for cover? Then both things have to be true. So if both things are true, they enter the club. And once they have entered the club, you have another conditional in there, which is the cashier. The cashier says, are you going to pay with credit card or cash? So it takes one of those two payment methods. If they say, no, I'm going to pay with a check, they get rejected because it's neither of one, no cash and no credit. So what we did today is basically learning how to write English into Python. We didn't learn anything new. We learned things that we have already used in our day-to-day life. So that's everything for today. Next week, next Monday, I'll see you guys again. We're going to be working with functions. So please review everything you've learned so far because we're going to be using everything to be able to create functions. And I'll talk a little bit more on Monday about why data analysts need to learn Python. So I saw that question. I'll address it on Monday. Thank you so much, everyone. It was a fantastic day, and I'll give it back to Juan.